I am taking a crisp $1 bill from my pocket and sliding it halfway into the side of the refrigerator door, right against the rubber seal. I close the door firmly on the paper and let go. The bill doesn't stay. It slides down the rubber and flutters to the kitchen floor without me even touching it. If your refrigerator cannot hold on to a dollar bill, it is likely costing you $1 every day in wasted power and a shortened lifespan. I will show you how to use condenser coil dedusting and gasket shimming to make a modern machine last 20 years, even if the manufacturer only expects 10. Most of these units are slowly choking under a matted coat of grime or leaking money through a brittle seal. If the cabinet is cold, we tend to think the machine is healthy, but it may be burning its motor out just to keep up. Within 10 minutes, you will know if your compressor is working twice as hard as it needs to. This is for any homeowner with a standard compressor-based unit older than 2 years, though it won't fix a failed electronic control board or a proprietary sealed system. We must determine whether your specific model hides its coils in the front or the back, and how to fix a gap without buying a $100 replacement part. I remember watching my brother Abraham back in 1962 using a long, thin radiator brush to pull gray lint from under a neighbor's first electric Frigidaire. The smell of warm, scorched dust filled the kitchen as he cleared the way for the air to move. He treated that machine with the same respect he gave a valuable draft horse. You don't let it work until it drops. You tend to it so it never has to. We will also look at why a clean floor doesn't mean clean coils and the one common household lubricant that actually ruins rubber seals forever. That humid July in 1962, the Lancaster County air was thick enough to chew. I followed Abraham to a neighbor's house, where their new electric unit was humming like a trapped hornet, but barely keeping the butter firm. Abraham knelt and pulled a metal plate from the base. He used a hand-cranked vacuum and a long brush to pull out matted layers of dog hair and grit that had felted itself against the cooling fins. A singed, dry smell drifted up, the scent of a motor trying to push air through a solid wall. Once the metal was visible again, the vibration smoothed into a steady purr. He explained that a motor which cannot shed its warmth is simply eating its own bearings. The Department of Energy has measured how those coils behave when they are blocked by common household debris, finding that energy use can jump by 30%. This is more than a higher bill. It is a measurement of mechanical wear. Refrigerator compressors are built for a set number of operating hours. When you force a unit to run 18 hours a day instead of 12, you are effectively stealing years from its life. You might save $40 a year on power, but the real thrift is avoiding the $1,500 cost of a premature replacement. Research from the Extension Office at Ohio State University shows that air leaks are the primary cause of frosting on the internal evaporator. This frost acts as insulation where you don't want it, trapping the cold away from your food and triggering the defrost heater to turn on more frequently. It is a tug of war happening behind the plastic panels. And the only winner is the power company. We are looking for a seal that feels slightly tacky and offers a distinct resistance when opened. The sound of a vacuum holding the cold inside. Static electricity from the cooling fan acts like a magnet for fibers shed by clothes and carpets, weaving them into a dense screen you cannot see from the outside. If the side of your refrigerator feels hot or the motor hasn't clicked off in over an hour, the machine is signaling for help. Think of the refrigerator as a heat pump rather than a box of ice. It doesn't actually create cold. It just relocates the warmth from your milk and cheese to the kitchen air through a loop of metal tubing. When the refrigerant hits the condenser coils, it must dump all that gathered heat. A layer of dust on those fins acts as a thermal barrier, much like a thick wool quilt. The heat stays trapped, and the refrigerant stays warm as it cycles back inside the cabinet. It is like trying to cool a steaming pot of soup while keeping the lid tightly on. The motor works, but the results are poor. The door gasket is the second half of this system, acting as a hollow rubber tube with a thin magnet tucked inside the flap. When the door closes, the magnet pulls the rubber tight against the steel frame to keep the room's humidity from turning into ice on your internal cooling fins. If that rubber becomes stiff or covered in a film of cooking grease, it loses its ability to squish into a proper seal. You can find these gaps by holding a flashlight inside the dark cabinet and looking for light escaping the corners. A leaking seal forces the motor to fight an invisible, warm breeze that never stops blowing. This maintenance fits any standard unit where you can reach a removable grill at the bottom or a panel on the back. It won't fix a proprietary built-in unit or a machine with a fried control board. To do this right, you need a vacuum with a slim attachment and a long, flexible coil brush. Not a stiff wire one, but something soft that bends around copper tubing without snagging or puncturing the metal. You also need warm water and a few drops of mild soap to cut through the sticky residue that bonds the door to the frame. One common mistake is using spray lubricants or heavy oils on the rubber. These actually dissolve the materials over time, turning the seal into a gummy mess that won't hold air. Instead, we use a small amount of plain petroleum jelly or food-grade silicone grease. We only need enough to keep the rubber supple so it doesn't stick and tear. Having these few items ready on the table will keep us from hunting through the workshop once the refrigerator is pulled out and the motor is exposed. I start by clearing the top of the refrigerator of any jars that might tumble. I lean into the frame and pull the unit away from the wall. I lay down cardboard to protect the floor from the heavy feet. Once I have room, I reach for the cord and pull the plug. You must never work on these parts while the power is connected. A fan can start the moment a thermostat clicks. If the plug has a layer of dust, I wipe it with a cloth to ensure a clean connection. I look at the base to find the access point. I snap off the front grill or move to the back to find the lower panel. This panel is often held by hex head screws or standard Phillips heads. I keep them in a dish so they do not roll away. When the panel is off, you will likely smell a dry, metallic scent of trapped heat and old dust. I use a lamp to see the narrow passages between the coils and the fan motor. I take the vacuum to pull away the thickest clumps of lint and hair from the floor and the coil edges. Then, I take the long, soft coil brush and slide it deep into the metal fins. I do not scrub. I just guide the bristles to catch the matted dust. These coils are soft aluminum or copper. Using a metal scraper to move dirt risks a puncture that would vent the refrigerant and ruin the machine. I move the brush back and forth, then use the vacuum again to catch the falling debris. Next, I locate the fan propeller near the compressor. Dust-caked blades become heavy and off balance, stressing the motor. I wipe each blade with a damp rag until the plastic is clean. I also look at the compressor that large black bell-shaped tank. If it is buried under a layer of dust, I wipe it down as well. It needs to shed heat just as much as the coils do. Once the floor underneath is clear, I replace the panel or grill, ensuring the screws are tight so they do not rattle. I open the door to inspect the rubber gasket. I take a bucket of warm water and a few drops of mild soap on a cloth to clean the deep folds of the rubber. Crumbs and sticky residue often hide in those bellows. I wipe the metal frame of the refrigerator until it is smooth. Stickiness on the frame stretches the gasket every time you open the door, eventually tearing the rubber or pulling it from its mounting groove. I dry the seal thoroughly with a clean towel. Once dry, I take a tiny dab of plain petroleum jelly and run it around the face of the seal. A thin, shimmering coat of lubricant keeps the rubber from becoming brittle and prevents it from sticking to the frame. It also helps the internal magnet pull the seal flat. If the dollar bill test showed a gap, I use the trick Abraham showed me. I lift the edge of the rubber and slide a thin strip of folded paper or foam weather stripping behind it to push the gasket out. Finally, I plug the cord back in. As I push the refrigerator back, I leave at least 2 inches of breathing room between the unit and the wall. If the machine is pressed against the drywall, the heat has nowhere to escape. I listen for the hum of the motor. Within an hour, the air from the base should feel warm, but not hot, indicating the heat is moving exactly as it was designed to. I must be plain about what this work can and cannot do. We are tending to the lungs and the skin of the machine, but we are not surgeons for its mind. Modern refrigerators rely on an integrated circuit board, a thin green plate of switches and paths that acts as the brain. These boards are sensitive to heat, but they are even more vulnerable to power surges. While keeping the coils clear helps the board by preventing the cabinet from overheating, it cannot stop a logic failure. If your interior lights are flashing like a signal or the digital display has gone dark, no amount of vacuuming will bring it back. That is a specialized electrical failure, not mechanical blockage, and it usually requires a part replacement rather than a brush. You must also listen for the signs that a compressor is already past the point of help. A healthy machine has a steady, low hum. If you hear a sharp metallic click followed by a heavy silence, or a loud vibrating buzz that sounds like a jar of angry bees, the internal valves or the start relay may have already been damaged by years of working in a dust-choked environment. This cleaning is a way to prevent that death, but it is not a resurrection. If you see an oily, yellowish residue on the floor or around the copper joints of the tubing, that is a sign of a refrigerant leak. Do not try to tighten those joints yourself. That system is sealed under pressure, and any further damage there will release the gas and turn the unit into a piece of scrap metal. How often you do this depends on your house. If you have a dog or cat that sheds, or if you live where dust is a constant guest, you should pull the fridge out every 6 months. For a quieter home, once a year is enough to keep the thermal barrier from forming. I have seen folks ignore this for a decade and wonder why their milk is only cool. By then, the compressor has often developed an internal knock from the lubrication thinning out under high heat. Be patient with the results. Once you plug the machine back in, it may run for an hour or more without stopping. It has to move the heat out of the cabinet that crept in while the power was off. Do not assume the cleaning failed if it doesn't click off right away. Give it a full 24 hours to find its new rhythm. You should eventually notice the machine staying silent for longer stretches. If it continues to run for 40 minutes out of every hour despite clean coils and a tight seal, the internal mechanics may be too worn to reach their old efficiency. We are stewards, not miracle workers. We do the work to keep the good tools going as long as they are able. I am taking that same dollar bill and sliding it back into the door seal where it fell through so easily before. I close the door and let the magnets do their work. When I pull on the paper now, I feel a stubborn resistance. The bill stays put, held tight by the clean, supple rubber. That little bit of shimming and a thorough cleaning has turned a sieve back into a true seal. If you want a more precise measure of your success, place a thermometer inside a glass of water on the middle shelf tonight. Check the reading tomorrow. You will likely find the temperature stays more consistent because the machine no longer has to gasp for air or fight an invisible warm breeze every time the compressor cycles. When the motor finally clicks off into a true silence, the kitchen feels more peaceful. Esther often says she can tell when I've spent an hour behind the icebox because the low, constant vibration stops rattling the glassware on the counter. We are not just chasing a lower number on a power bill. We are practicing a quiet stewardship of the tools we rely on. Clearing away that thick layer of felted dust honors the effort that went into building the machine and ensures we are not wasteful with the resources we have been given. I would be glad to hear what you discovered under your own unit today. Tell me the age of your refrigerator and if you found a heavy wall of lint choking your coils. If you have a different way of keeping the rubber gasket soft and tacky, please share those details in the comments so we can all learn together. Next time, I want to show you how Abraham handles the sediment at the bottom of a water heater, another hidden thief that ruins a good tank. Stay frugal, stay free,